01. Mental Health 101 is created to empower our mental health awareness. And today I have my special guest. He's considering as one of the founder of the Psychologists Influence Customer Behavior Without Feeling Gross. No other than Dr. Chris Gray.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate you having me on.
Welcome to Mental Health 101, Dr. Chris. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. My name's Chris Gray. I currently work as the founder of the Psychologist. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I have been working in actually sales and marketing that world for the last 30 years. So I'm no longer a practicing therapist, and I want to make that clear as we talk about mental health that I'm no longer practicing. But I have I have extensive experience in working in the mental health field. Certainly, with my background, I spent many years studying mental health as well as working in the field before I transitioned into the business world. And as I mentioned, I don't have I don't really in this space have anything to really promote or sell to the audience at this point. I just feel very passionately and very strongly about having open and honest conversations about mental health. And Daniel, I commend you for leading these conversations because it does help so much to help destigmatize mental health, keep the conversation going, and getting people the help that they need.
Definitely. Dr. Chris Gray, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. What does mental health awareness mean to you personally beyond just a general definition?
Yeah. So I think that, in my background, so, obviously I'm trained in this area, but I also have dealt with depression and adult attention deficit disorder for many, many years. So I've kind of been on both sides of the couch as it were. And so I think that can bring some unique perspective here that I hope will be helpful to your audience. I think when it comes to mental health, I think, the thing about mental health is that any kind of psychological or mental issues that we have fall on a spectrum. So it's not you're either depressed or not, or you either are, have attention deficit disorder or not, or you have this or that. It is on a continuum. We all experience sadness. We all experience anxiety. We all experience, moments of having difficulty paying attention. It's a matter of when those things become out of control and they begin to cause problems in our lives, that they interfere with our functioning, our ability to have positive relationships, our ability to achieve at work or keep up our grades at school. That's when mental health and mental health issues start to move into more of a clinical area where it's time to take action and seek professional help. And so I think it's very important for us to, keep that in mind. So when someone is depressed, when they are clinically depressed, they're not just having a temporary bout of sadness. This is something that has gone on for at least 2 weeks and is interfering with their ability to live their lives in a way that they would like to. And so, I think that when we talk about mental health, it's about getting people back into that, functionality and being able to, just be effective in their day-to-day lives.
Dr. Chris, what is the most common or one common misconception about mental health that you find particularly important to address and why?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daniel. And one that comes to mind immediately is something that I hear quite frequently, which is, there weren't as many mental health issues 20 years ago or 30 years ago as there are now. Or, people weren't always being diagnosed with depression or attention deficit disorder or, whatever that may be back in the old days, right? And, I think that that can be very damaging to people who are experiencing clinical mental health issues, because it kind of implies that people are either just making excuses, or they're not really dealing with an illness or a medical condition. They're dealing with, or they're just, kind of saying they're dealing with depression or anxiety or whatever that may be, or that doctors are just over diagnosing or over prescribing. And that, when you're talking about people who are already dealing with really difficult levels of self-doubt and guilt and shame, that just piles it on. And I think that the reason why, if there is, whether it's perceived or whether it's actual, that there are more cases of mental health issues now, it's simply because there's more awareness. We're better at diagnosing, we're better at getting people treatment, and there's slightly less stigma to it as well. And so you combine that with things like social media, and of course, you're going to hear about it more often than you would have 20 or 30 years ago. And so I think that when people are talking about mental illness, I think it's important to keep that in mind, that, it's not a matter of people making excuses or being overdiagnosed. It's just that we're more aware of it now than we were then. And so that's a good thing. And it's good because it allows people to be more open, allows them to get help more quickly, it allows them to be diagnosed more quickly, and helps them to get back on their feet and be, active and productive as they want to be.
Reflecting on your journey, what has been the most significant shift in your understanding of mental health?
Uh, you know, I'm going to come at this from a personal perspective on this because, I, as I mentioned, I've dealt with depression my entire adult life, frankly, and I'm doing great now, by the way. So no worries now. I'm like doing very well. Um, but one thing that really I want people to understand about depression in particular is depression is something that when you're experiencing it is very difficult to get out of, because depression lies to you. And I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned in my journey, and has helped me tremendously in putting into perspective my experience when I have felt depressed, or have experienced depression, is that depression lies to you. It tells you you're worthless. It tells you that you are, just faking it, or you're just, looking for attention, or things are never going to change, and it's always going to be like this, which I think is probably the worst of them. And that is really difficult to deal with. And so I think that when I'm in that situation, to remind myself that that negative self-talk that comes with depression, that feelings of inadequacy, or the feeling that I can't do something, those are lies. And those are lies that depression tells you to kind of keep its grip on you. And when you can think about it that way, at least I've found that to be extremely helpful, in giving myself some grace, combating sort of the negative self-talk that comes along with depression, and continuing to take steps towards being healthier and more productive.
Dr. Chris, as the founder of Bicologist, how do you advocate mental health awareness within the company?
For me, it is about being open and honest in these conversations. And I remember many years ago, I had a mentor who, I mentioned my attention deficit disorder, and he immediately said, "Don't talk about it. Don't tell anyone about it. Don't talk about it. It will undermine your credibility. People will try to take advantage of it." And that was really, in retrospect, that was really bad advice. Um, yeah, because it just piled on more stigma, and made me feel like there was something wrong with me that I couldn't talk about. And so my main way of being an advocate is to be open about my own experiences and allow others to be open with their own experiences. And I think that in and of itself, that authenticity, that openness is supportive, and it shows people, look, you can deal with these things. You can still be productive, you can still be successful, you can still, achieve anything you want to achieve. This is just something that you need to deal with. And it's like anything else. I mean, you know, any other issue in our lives that, we kind of have to deal with, to be as productive or as happy or as satisfied in life as we want to be. It's just one of those things. And I think that that openness, is so important for people to hear, the people who are struggling with a mental illness, just to be able to see other people who are functioning well and being as successful as they want to be, all with this, mental illness that they have to deal with. And so for me, that is the main way. And I think it's something that's very important, to supporting others.
Dr. Chris, what role do you believe workplaces play in mental health awareness, and what is the concrete change organizations should implement?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I I have to say I haven't had the greatest experiences, in the workplace in dealing with, mental illness. I would say I've been in many situations that have not been supportive. As I mentioned, like with the mentor saying, don't talk about it. Um, I know for me, I think that it is about understanding your employees, and their needs, and understanding that, you know, when someone is dealing with a mental illness, you may need to make some accommodations for them. You may need to take some extra steps for them, but no more than any other medical issue that people deal with. And I think to look at it as a medical issue, an illness versus something that is stigmatized or shameful, is really important in the workplace. Because again, people, there's no reason, that when properly treated and properly dealing with their situation, that people can't be productive and successful. And so I think that in the workplace, it's important to talk about these things. It's important to have an open door policy about these things. And I think it's important to ask, what can we do to help you, be successful here? And I wish someone had asked me that about specifically about my attention deficit, disorder, because that is something that has affected me quite a bit in the workplace. I'm someone that is, I really deal with being distracted easily. And the work that I do is often something that requires a lot of concentration and a lot of think time. And being, for example, being in an open workspace, that is just not something that I can do. An open office environment where there are no offices, there's no place to go to kind of close yourself in and just take some time to think, without all the chatter of the office around you, people talking on their phones and walking by and all of that. That would have been extremely helpful for me. And if someone had just asked, what they could do to help me, that would have been something that would have been very helpful. And so I think that, it is, we spend so much time in the workplace, that, work environments are an important space where we deal with these things. And for companies to not acknowledge or not ask, how can we help you be more successful, or how can we help you be effective here, is really in the end shooting themselves in the foot, because there are a lot of people that, could be functioning just great and doing amazing work. But because they're dealing with something and they don't have a supportive environment, are not able to do so.
Definitely. And how can we better support the mental health of young people, especially in the context of social media and academic pressures?
Yeah. Well, Danielle, I think you're doing it. It's having these open conversations, not being afraid to talk about mental health in an open and honest way. I mean, social media, for all the benefits that it has, it also has the underside. And I think one of those is that, when we're on social media, we're not typically showing our weak side. We're not typically showing our vulnerabilities. We're not typically showing the imperfections in our lives. And we all have them. It's, um, we're typically kind of showing our great vacation or wonderful dinner we had, or look how fabulous I am. And, that's human nature. But at the same time, it's when we can use social media to be open and authentic and share, like, hey, my life isn't perfect. Here's what I'm dealing with. And here's how I'm doing it. And here's what works for me. And here's what could possibly work for you. I think that having these conversations out in the open, not being afraid that someone might think badly of us because of it. I mean, people are going to think badly of you for all sorts of different things, right? So, this is just one thing that maybe they will. But I think when you're being truly vulnerable and truly authentic, that people's initial instinct is to be supportive and to be compassionate. And for those that aren't, I really don't have room for them in my life anyway. So what they think doesn't matter. But I think, particularly for young people, I read a statistic that, in the last year, about, I think 1 in 12 adults have dealt with depression. And that's even higher for adolescents because it's often not diagnosed properly, or not treated properly. Because it's a little more difficult in adolescence with there's so much going on in their lives and so many changes happening in their lives that it can be a little hard to diagnose or hard to see the signs of depression. And I just think by being open and authentic and having these conversations and showing people, the realities of it versus the stigma is something that is very important.
Truly, truly very important, people. And Dr. Chris, what are the some practical everyday habits or tools that people can incorporate to proactively support their mental well being?
I think one of the most important is to develop your sense of self-awareness. Um, you know, because it's so important to kind of be monitoring yourself and doing an open and honest assessment of yourself and how you're feeling, what's going on in your life, how you're responding to things, if you're being as, satisfied and effective in your life as you want to be. And when you're not, to observe that and be aware of it and try to understand, what are the patterns I'm seeing, and do that without any judgment whatsoever. Self-awareness and judgment are two very different things. It is simply noticing what's going on in your life and not being afraid to be honest with yourself about it. I think so many times for people, it is that denial or the unwillingness or the fear of really being honest with yourself about what's going on that can delay treatment. It can delay you getting back on your feet quickly. And so I think developing self-awareness is one of the most important things. And it just starts with simply noticing what's going on without judgment. So I think that's kind of foundationally one of the most important things. And then I think part of this, and where self-awareness also comes into play, is that it allows you to kind of assess what works for you in dealing with these things and what doesn't. I know for me, certainly exercise, working out, running, biking, swimming, those are all things that help me tremendously with both depression and attention deficit disorder. I think not being afraid of medications when those are needed is also important. It's something I struggled with for a very long time, as I did not want to take antidepressants and resisted that. And then I went on them and then I would go off them because I didn't like, being on them, and not because of any side effects per se, but just I didn't like the idea of it. And it wasn't until, 5 or 6 years ago when I really went through a really bad depressive episode, um, because I stopped taking my medication and stopped being self-aware. And um, that's when it really convinced me that, these are just tools. These are just tools that will help you if they help you. For some people, different medications work differently than others. I'm happy to say I found the one that works for me, and it works great. And I've been in therapy for most of my adult life. I mean, as a therapist myself, I'm very open to therapy and I advocate for it. And I just think that is one of the key things that you can do is talk to somebody, and not a friend, not a family member, because they're not objective. As much as they may try to be, they have an ongoing relationship with you. So, that can become a barrier to really successful therapy, because you become, a little more self-conscious about what you're going to say, because you're going to obviously, I'm going to have dinner tomorrow, or I'm going to see you at school tomorrow, or, whatever, at work, whatever. It's so important to have an objective person that is not in your day-to-day life to talk to, because that is the foundation of a really great therapeutic relationship, where you can be open and honest with each other without worrying about, running into them tomorrow and feeling embarrassed because you shared something. Or they can be, a little bit blunt with you sometimes. I know I have a great therapist, and every once in a while he's like, okay, hold on, wait a minute. What did you just say? And he really does push back. And that's a style that works well for me. Everyone has a style that will work for them. But for me, I need someone who, is not going to let me get away with, my negative thinking sometimes. And so I think, one, self-awareness; two, um, be open to the tools that are available, whether that's medication or therapy, or an activity that you find really satisfying, and when you do it, you feel good about yourself. I mean, for me, like, my happiest place in the world is on my bike. And I think that it's just knowing what works for you, and sort of tracking along with, is this working? Does this make me feel better? Does this make me feel satisfied? Is this something that's positive in my life? um, and on the flip side, being aware of those things that are negative for you, whether that is a bad habit or toxic people in your life that are negative, that make you feel bad. And being, again, open and honest with yourself about those things, and then taking the steps that it takes to do that. And, you know, coming out of a depression is a monumental task. It is very challenging. It takes a lot of work. And it is slow going usually. And, you need to do everything you can to set yourself up for success in that scenario.
Definitely. And Dr. Chris, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season as well. Comedy 101 in second season, and my Food 101 in fifth season too. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Dr. Chris, looking ahead, what do you believe is the next critical conversation we need to tackle in the mental health awareness movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really new and interesting research, particularly, I'll talk about depression, in the field of depression, around new approaches, new medications, the things like, um, psilocybin or ketamine. I think there are just some really fascinating things that are out there now to help people that, again, have some kind of stigma attached to them. And I would just say, it's important for us to continue exploring new ways to help people, because not everything is going to work for everybody. And finding what is going to help people get back on their feet more quickly, feel better more quickly, and have wonderful, productive lives that they want to have. And so I think continuing our conversations about just destigmatizing is so important. Whether that's a new treatment, a diagnosis, or what have you, is just keep this conversation going. Let us all be open and honest with each other.
Open, people. Open for everything. Don't hide. And if you need help, please do ask for help. Dr. Chris Gray, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom on Mental Health 101. So, can you please invite our listeners to support the Bicologies or any projects that you are doing right now?
Well, sure. And this is a little off topic, but it is in the realm of psychology. So, absolutely. As I mentioned, I'm a consumer psychologist, and you can visit my website, thebicologist.com. I have a monthly newsletter where I dive into consumer psychology issues each month. I take a deep dive into a particular issue. And if that's something that's interesting to you, then come on aboard. I don't send any spammy stuff. You only hear from me once a month, and
Yes.
it would be very helpful.
Yes, people, let's support Dr. Chris Gray because if you support him, for sure, more and more and more empowering business to come, and for sure, more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Dr. Chris Gray, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for everything you do, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
More to come, people. See you soon.